Hearing.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Good evening. I'd like to open the public hearing on the proposed school budget for the 2018-19 school year. The date is Tuesday, April 17th, and I will turn the floor over to our superintendent.
Okay, we're going to give a brief presentation / update as to where we are, and then we'll allow time if anybody from the public wants to make a comment regarding the budget. Tom, maybe we'll start with the couple of slides that you have. Please know, this is not the true budget hearing. The budget hearing will actually be on the second Tuesday,
May
8th, 1 week before the budget hearing, or before the budget vote, sorry. So this is kind of a preliminary. If you can't see in the back, I do have handouts on the table right there for you to be able to take a look at it, because I know it is kind of hard to see at times, but it's about as big as we can get it. So I just want to kind of go over some of the trends we're seeing, especially on our enrollment. And as we can see for the past, I think there's 10 years, maybe 9 years up there. 8 of those 9 years, we're heading south as our enrollment's concerned, from a high of 1248 now down to 1050, which was last year. And this year we're at 1035 currently. So we're 15 less than we were last year at this time. Even though we got a big influx of people who came in over the summer, we still have had an overall decrease from the prior year. So this slide up here shows us that, I know it's kind of hard to read a little bit, but if you see that yellow line going across there, that's showing an average of 81 students. So if you took our total population divided by the 13 grade levels, you get an average of 81 students in each grade level. And as you can see, the next 5 years, and remember the 12th graders, they graduated last year, so they're already gone, new ones have come across. So, but as you can see, the next 4 years are above average, with the one in 9th grade showing up there just about average. But as we can see at the last couple, at kindergarten last year, we were talking about 56 kids. The year before, I think it was 58. This year is less than 60, so we're in a trend of around 60 right now. And I do want to show you the next slide, which kind of shows where our kindergarten numbers come from. So let's take a look at this, and if you take a look at the blue line, all right, that blue line is the live births. So we get data, we don't get data, but the state gets data based on your school district of how many potential students were born in your school district. And basically what this has been showing us is that we usually get 13% more than what are actually live births. So if we had 100 children born 5 years ago, we should expect 113, all right? So if we have 50 born, they would expect 56, 57 kids coming in. But this has trended over a number of years. This is 10 years, I think they trend this over. So it kind of gives us an idea, and I know I don't have a slide here. We've seen the next few years of live births, and there's no spike going upwards. It's pretty even. I mean, there's a little slight uptick, but nothing that's going to show, you know, all of a sudden these are going to be classes of 80. They look like we're going to be 60 for the next at least 4 to 5 years. We'll have to see where that trend goes from there. What I did want to do here, this is the tax levy cap. We did make a change to this, and you know, quite simply, I know we've gone over this before, but we've had a growth factor of 0.57. So what was estimated that we've had a 57% growth of new buildings or additions. This is not remodeling your house or anything of this nature, or buying of a house. This is strictly based on new buildings, new additions. And it was calculated for our district at 0.57, which is a little bit below what we typically get, a little bit below. Typically we're about, I think, a 0.7. So we add in our pilots. Later on, we take out the pilots, but right here, we had a 2%, it was our growth factor, the CPI, so it's a lesser of 2%. It was actually, I think, 2.13. We had to round it down to 2, but for the first time in a long time, we got back up to 2. For the longest time, we had some very low numbers, and actually one year had a negative number. We just counted that as a 0. But in reality, what has changed here is on the second sheet here is this local capital expenditures. I was allowed to add $200,000 here, and that was for the interest on our bands for the project in that, so we can start that. To start the paying of that debt service.
Tom, would you explain what a ban is, please?
It's a bond anticipation note.
Yeah.
As a school district, we don't go out the bonds right away. We have to wait a little while till we get further into the project. They want the project at least towards its completion before we can go out and get a bond. So in the meantime, we need to get a ban. It's a bond anticipation note, and this is to cover our expenses for right now, our architect and construction manager, and the people who have done the testing early. We had to borrow that money. But we have to borrow money for the construction part and for the construction manager as he gets into the project. So that's what a ban is. All right, it's a bond anticipation note. You also hear the name TAN, it's a tax anticipation note, and a RAN is a revenue anticipation note. So those are going to become more in your knowledge base as we go further into the tax cap. Because in some cases, some districts aren't able to meet their needs before they get their tax monies. So they have to get a revenue anticipation. That's borrowing monies in the summer to get them through the summer and into September until their taxes collection starts. So some school districts need to do that, especially as people's fund balances reduce. We haven't had to do that, but we may within the next few years have to do something like that. Because we said we get a bulk of our money in September, but we got to get from July and August to September. So we have some big bills in the summertime to pay too. So what this is, and I know you've seen this before, and you do have this in front of you, just for the board members, you do have it in front of you if you don't want to squint up there. But we started with the rollover budget, it was 4.22%. We did our first draft, it came out 5.45%. That was when our principals were putting in what their program needed. And since then we've done a lot of, as you know, gone through a lot of reiterations of it. We had 5 prior drafts. So these are just all the ins and outs that have occurred over time. But what I want to take you to is the where we left off after our 4th draft. So, and that's right here on this page.
It's the 3rd page from the back of that packet.
Okay. So when we left here at the last time, we had a gap of $215,599. All right, so the next section, let's forget about that part of it. So I want to go on to the Tier 1 budget reduction.
Yeah, Tom, let me just take that one for a minute. The biggest change since our last meeting was that we took off this list of Tier 1 options. We took off the library clerk. So that came off this list of tiered cuts, and what you see on that last page is everything else that remained. The only staffing impacts to get us down to the tax levy cap are from the Tier 1 cuts are the decision not to replace typist retiring from Chancellor, and the decision not to replace the maintenance worker who is retiring. At this point, in order to get to the tax levy cap number, no, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, Tom, none of the 1.0 positions were reduced to 0.8 FTE. None of them were. So all of the 1.0 positions that were on the tiered cut lists remain at 1.0. Actually, the only reductions to get this budget down to the tax levy cap limit were the two I already mentioned. The decision not to fill the typist position at Chancellor and the decision not to fill the maintenance worker position at district-wide. You'll look at the other things on the Tier 1 options that are on the last page in your packet, and everything else has been reduced from the budget to get the bottom line budget down to the tax levy cap figure, which Tom, would be to reduce the budget by $215,599. That gets us down to the tax cap. Okay.
In addition to those two that Joe mentioned, we did add approximately $15,000 for potential overtime substitute work. We're thinking this will work, but just in case it doesn't, we have ourselves a little bit of a cushion just in case.
Regarding the typist and the maintenance worker.
The maintenance worker. So if we get overflooded with clerical work and we need to bring somebody in for a short period of time, there's some money there to do that, especially in the fall when there is a lot of reporting going on as far as 504s and things of that nature. So we put some money in there in case we need additional help.
You'll also notice that on the second to last page, the $200,000 that Tom was talking about a few minutes ago, which is a piece of the interest on the bond anticipation note that has been built into this version of the draft, but it doesn't impact the tax levy cap number. So reducing the budget by $215,000 from the draft that we were looking at on April 3rd is what gets us down to the tax levy cap. So unlike last year when we exceeded the cap and needed a 60% supermajority to pass the budget, with a budget that's within the tax levy cap, we need a simple majority of 50% plus one for passage of the first budget. The budget goes to vote on Tuesday, May 15th. Also, I would want to mention, not dealing with the finances specifically, we do have three individuals who have submitted petitions to run for two seats on the Board of Education. The two seats currently occupied by Diane Lyons and Mark Fleischauer are up for vote this time. Both Mark and Diane have submitted petitions to run for those seats, and another member of the community, David LaValle, is it LaValle? LaValle, who's sitting right in front of Susan. David also submitted a duly executed petition. So those three names will be on the ballot come May 15th. And right before the meeting started, we picked names at random as to the order on the ballot. And David's name will be first, Mark's name will be second, and Diane's name will be third. So just so everybody knows who's running for what seats. And I don't know if board members have any comments or questions at this point before we open it up to anybody who wants to comment on the budget. And this is a different open comment period than what we'll have later in the in the regular board
Yeah.
meeting, this should
budget.
strictly address the budget, that's correct.
All
But
right.
if you guys have questions or,
Just if you could explain that 200,000 ban that we've added, that it's actually being spread over 3 budget cycles rather than taking one big hit for the taxpayers
yeah,
every
good,
year?
yes, good point.
Good question. And this comes from our financial advisors in that approximately, it's going to be about $700,000 is going to be the hit to the budget when that comes on to our rolls in 2 years. And they said that we should ramp ourselves up, do 200 the first year, another 200 the second year, and the last year be the 300,000. We're going to be spending more than $700,000. That's the net of state aid. That's the taxpayer portion. Our financial consultants really do this for a couple of reasons. First of all, like I said, we are borrowing monies, and we do have some money in our bond project, but not a lot. That will get eaten up real quickly. This is to safeguard those monies for the construction too. On top of this, instead of doing, I want to say a third, it's 200, 200, 300, but it's a slow impact to the taxpayers as opposed to being extremely large in that first year, being well over 2% increase. This will even that out a bit. So it's about a 0.7% increase, a 0.7, and then around a 1. So this evens it out as opposed to all at one time like 2.5%, which will be a significant increase just on that alone, without even adding in whatever the tax cap is that year.
Any other questions? Comments? Are you ready to open for
Well, you can
questions
open
or
it-
comments?
You can open it to,
Questions or comments?
well, it's
from-
really comments is what
Comments?
what a hearing
We
is
can't
for.
answer questions, okay, comments. Comments. For the budget hearing portion of our meeting.
Vic Britton, teacher, vice president of the RTA, resident. Two things mainly. I just want to reiterate that there is still the latent hit that the English department took that I believe is a program change and a program cut somehow that's still going to be worked out, whether it's AAS classes, elective classes, AP classes. And then just in general related to the project, not the number, and not getting into specifics, but just the process of how the budget formulation occurs and the interaction with staff. I said something at the work session, and I said something individually, so I'm just advocating for that to be on the map, that the process wasn't as inclusive, incenting staff to really provide some positive feedback. It was in some cases negative, so to a better process next year, I'd like to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Comments from anyone here? Further comments, Tom?
Close the hearing.
And I think we're going to close the hearing, and we will open the meeting
At 7:30.
at 7:30.
Yep.
So we have a brief time in between. All those in favor of closing the budget hearing? Okay, closing the budget hearing.
Okay. So be it.
Good evening.
Right there.
Welcome back for those of you who may have stepped out, and welcome to those who are just arriving. This is the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. It's Tuesday, April 17th. I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Before we start, I just want to let everybody around the table know that I'm on call for work, so if I jump up and run out, it's because I'm on call, so.
Don't become alarmed.
Don't be alarmed.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 3rd, 2018 regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, corrections, suggestions? I have one, Whitney, which is to add the word immediately to the sentence reading. It is heartening to see people work hard to understand the process, which is not immediately transparent. All those in favor, the minutes as amended. Unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 10th, 2018 special meeting executive session?
So moved.
Second.
I just had a comment. Little correction on that, that Whitney already took care of in the printout in 2.0 and 3.0, that the board member names be updated.
Okay. Everyone in favor of the minutes as amended? Okay, that's unanimous. That motion passes. We have time for public comment. May I invite members of the public to come forward and address the board? I also want to let the public know we have some extremely interesting minutes coming up, so we hope you'll stay and listen. It's time for reports and discussions. The 2018-19 budget development update.
Well, we've been pretty much through it during the hearing part of our meeting, but I put it on the agenda in case there are any comments or questions that board members have. I think you wanted to make a
Do you have a comment, Laura?
I do not.
Oh, I have a comment. At our last board meeting, we were presented with a petition with over 100 signatures, and I want to thank the members of the community who took the time to participate in that democratic process of articulating its position and sharing it with us, particularly for sharing the comments that came through the collection of the signatures. And I wanted to speak to one comment in particular, a lengthy comment that was very, well, I think all the comments were quite thoughtful and considered. This particular parent writes, please reconsider the allocation of cuts, keep all of our teachers in full-time positions so that we can live by the commitment to quality education in Rhinebeck. Thank you. And many members of the parent community were deeply concerned about the prospect of teachers having their positions cut or perhaps not being having whole positions. And I want to speak to the few people I see who are parents who may have been part of that process, but also to the larger audience to say that that really has been a guiding concern for the conversations that have taken place around the board table. And it's an extremely difficult process, as we know, to bring a budget to completion. And it's also important to acknowledge and recognize that a budget represents a kind of snapshot, right, in terms of thinking about the allocation of resources and the revenues that are coming into the district. We recognize it's a dynamic document, that there will have to be adjustments and changes made in response to changes as they arise with staffing, enrollment, and all the factors that come into play with planning for the district. And as I know all of our professional faculty are well aware. So we stand behind that commitment, and it has certainly guided us in a difficult time of trying to allocate resources. So I do want to thank those who've come forward and put such thoughtful suggestions before us, and the degree to which we've been able to listen and incorporate those suggestions is really in large part due to the advocacy and the participation in this process of all members of the community. Questions? Okay.
Move along.
We'll move along. Board committee reports, long-range planning.
Okay, this set's mine. We returned to the discussion of a Citizens Advisory Committee. Right now, as Deirdre's pointing out, there are a lot of engaged voices, and we want those engaged voices to become engaged in a working dialogue with us around long-range planning. And we'd like for this advisory committee to help us identify long-range goals for further development. Now, having said that, we also have a CDEP process that has been remarkably thoughtful. All members of our teacher, administrative, parent community have been involved. And we're working through that. So this Citizens Advisory Committee would be a supplement to CDEP. It would be guided by the new mission, vision, core values that we approved last year and all of the work that CDEP is doing so that we can identify goals from this end that can help feed the CDEP plan. We also feel very strongly that parent voices be recognized, but also that faculty voices are recognized in this Citizens Advisory Committee. Later, you're going to hear about the charter that we've drafted, and we'll go for approval of that from you all next time. We are also going to try to engage with our data report earlier in the process so that we can identify what programs have worked well, what programs need additional support, so that the goals that we make annually and the budgeting goals that we have to meet feed those needs. We also realize that any changes we make are going to have a direct impact somewhere, so we need to be really mindful that we address all positive and negative potential outcomes. We also talked at length about the budget process, and we really want to change the budgeting process as we have done it for so long. There are always going to be years that we have to tighten our belts and we have to find economies. We all understand that moving forward in the tax cap era. But what we need to do is change the conversation. In the last couple of years, it's been incredibly reductive, and it needs to focus more on improvement and reallocation of funds so that we're putting our resources in a place that meet our goals annually. We're going to engage more closely with the rollover budget, I think, from the very beginning, and any additions to the budget really need to be linked directly back to the goals that we're setting annually for the district. So in that vein, we have decided that it would be helpful to try to pull apart the budget and create sort of sub-long-range plans, for instance, in athletics or technology, or we haven't really quite figured out how we want to do the grade level analysis. That's a little trickier, but if we can see, based on our enrollment, based on participation numbers, based on need for technology, maybe it's time to start phasing teams out if there's no support for them, rather than, trying to recruit kids to play sports they're not interested in. We can try to get them into sports that are, a little bit more well subscribed. And in terms of technology, buying appropriate technology for not only faculty, but students and the office, so that we are running as efficiently as we can. What does that look like 3 and 5 years out? Those little sub-LRPs are going to feed finance, I think, directly. So we're going to need you guys to really dig into the numbers as we sort of float ideas to explore. Deirdre also raised the idea of internal audits and whether there is an appropriate place to start diving into those. We talked about the risk assessment that was done about 5 years ago now, and the internal audits that have come out of that process. Maybe it's time to relook at those and identify additional places where we can find efficiencies. Tom mentioned that cleaning and maintenance would be a place that we could look at after the capital project. With newer facilities, we're not going to need so much repair. Administrative staffing, with the advent of the new accounting system, there may be efficiencies there. We talked again about our statistical neighbors. We've been talking about that throughout this process. We also want to identify our aspirational neighbors, those school districts that are high performing with enrollments that look similar to ours. Their funding may be quite different from ours, but how are they providing services to kids in such an exceptional way? And then Tom laid out these charts that you've got from this Forecast 5 program that we're using. It laid out sort of the Rhinebeck story about finance, enrollment, and teacher-pupil ratios. So there's lots that we can dive into here. He sat and did a training with the Forecast 5 folks during one of our snow day givebacks. And he's going to continue to work with them to develop further our story so that we have really good sort of visual aids when we're talking about the numbers and where we're allocating resources. We've had our next meeting, which Deirdre will address, and you'll hear about it all. I don't have to go through the whole chapter.
So we'll go to that meeting we're going
Yeah,
to order, right?
yeah.
So next is finance.
All right.
No?
Yeah. It's me, right? Let's see. So we talked about the BOCES building project. And what BOCES wants to do is close their beta site, which is the building along Route 44 down in Poughkeepsie. And they want to bring that onto the main campus and have it be just one site. And they're talking about a $40 million project that we will be helping finance. Now, the financing there are two methods of financing, and it all depends on the 13 individual boards. If all 13 agree, then we can arrange for our own financing, which is potentially a better rate. If only one of the board disagrees, then the financing is going to be through the dormitory authority. The project is not available for state aid, so it will require to go to the tax cap calculation. The project is subject to a public vote, and the vote will take place in December. They'll give us the date later. And BOCES has not provided any information regarding rental rates as far as is this move actually going to be saving us money. So there's that coming down the pipeline. The next thing is that we talked about the workers' compensation reserve. 5 years ago, we had a $10 million deficit for funding our reserve, which was considered an unfunded liability. Today, we are $2 million in the black, a result of 5 years of putting money in and not a lot of injuries. We've righted ourselves, so we'll take the additional money out of the reserve and put it in our general fund balance.
Can I just make one little statement there? That isn't $2 million of us, that's $2 million across all of Dutchess County schools. It's,
Too bad.
it isn't $2 million of newfound money.
nice.
Wish it was, but it is not. That's shared by all the school districts other than Wappingers. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. That's quite all right.
I know people think, oh.
The next thing we talked about was the debt service, which Tom discussed earlier this evening. The debt service implementation scenario falls into two categories. Either we put off the impact until the 2020-21 budget and get hit with a sudden and high rate, or we slowly take the impact on and build the cost into our budget over the next 3 years. The recommendation has been to go for scenario 2, which is spreading the debt service over the next 3 years. And the debt service is part of the budget, so it does not increase our tax levy, but it does increase our tax levy, but not our tax rate.
No, not quite.
Oh, did I
It
mess it up?
it does not add to our tax levy cap limit.
Okay. Did I?
Will increase our tax rate.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Let's see, the 2018-2019 budget development, and we discussed this earlier this evening as well. The Tier 1 changes, we took out the library clerk and placed that on the Tier 2 list. The CLS typist has a 14.5 overtime, no longer the 15. The BIC week expenses are not replacing the typist. The only personnel changes on Tier 1 is not filling the typist position and creating a hybrid operations facility position of cleaner groundskeeper. We looked at the Tier 2 changes and we added the library clerk onto that list, the CLS assistant principal 4 days, the director of technology 4 days, RHS BMS assistant principal 4 days, and the Rhinebeck High School reduced summer guidance days to 5 days per counselor.
So just a point of clarification, all of those Tier 2 changes, however, do not figure into the budget scenario any longer.
Correct.
Questions for finance? Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be more information coming from BOCES, but it might be necessary to have Mr. Woolley come and speak to us before December, so this is going to be.
Yeah, I'm sure
whatever impact
they'll have a
this
road
is.
show
They will.
to travel from
Yeah.
district to district.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to let everybody know, the first question will be, and we'll need to answer it shortly, is whether or not we would agree to do our own financing, okay? That means we would go out and get our portion of it, whatever it is. We're about 3% of BOCES, so we would go out and get our own borrowing. But we have to have all the school districts agree to that, but we would go out individually and get it. If one school district decides they don't want to do that, and there may be one or two in this county who may not, because they may get a better rate through the dormitory authority as opposed to going out individually. So, but that's one thing. Just by you agreeing about how you're financing the project doesn't approve it, it goes to a public vote. It will ultimately be up to the public. Our question will be just, how would the financing be happen if it's a positive? If it's a negative, we don't have to worry about it for a couple of years until they put a new plan up. But one of the things they already need to do is, what are we gonna pay less in rent? And when they close beta, how much would we save? They didn't include that in the calculation, because right now I wouldn't recommend it, because it's about $60,000 a year. Well, how much would we save by not having to pay rent? Whether it's 60,000, less, more, I don't know yet. So they are working on that, and we'll get a new printout to show exactly what that cost to us would be per year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jacqueline?
And I just want, again, obviously we'll get more information, but in noting that the project not available for state aid and we're required to go onto the tax cap calculation,
Yeah.
does that mean all of the money that we have to put towards this, whether interest or otherwise, all the money that we put towards it would have to be built into our regular budget within the tax
Our
levy
portion
cap?
of that,
Our
yes.
portion of that.
This, unlike our own debt service, where this is our debt service, and I'm just using round numbers, $2 million in debt service, but we're getting state aid of $800,000. We can put $1.2 million on our tax rolls, and it doesn't affect our tax cap. This is purely an expenditure. It is not dealt with the same way as our own debt service. And this is the issue that we've been trying to get our legislators to correct, to be able to shelter this part of the money. But right now, it's not.
That part of the discussion in Albany when this most recent state budget was being negotiated was to make an exemption from the tax levy cap for BOCES capital improvements, but it did not get approved.
Yes.
And as for the workers' compensation reserve that was across all Dutchess schools, how much additional money came out of the reserve and put into our general fund balance?
I believe, now just take it up, and I forgot to look, maybe Christine remembers, I think there's $135,000 in that reserve still. I think we established it for 150, I think we used 15, and we have 135 left, which would go over to our fund balance itself, to increase the fund balance. So, I hope to have it at the next board meeting, that
great.
that resolution, so we can transfer those monies.
And slightly separate question, but what is our fund balance at, or is that a separate conversation for another?
That's for another, I don't,
Another whole lot.
I have to
Fair
have the
enough.
books in front of me to answer
Totally
those
fair.
type of questions.
Sorry, just occurred to me.
Especially at the end of a budget season, there's just too many numbers.
Yes.
So just to clarify, you're going to wipe out the reserve? Is that what you're proposing?
Yep, and transfer it to the normal fund balance. So that
Okay,
will
you're not going to
increase
leave
our-
any cushion because
No, we
won't need to?
No, we're in a good place right now. No, our auditors,
Are you talking about the district or the consortium?
well, so this is a district account.
Yeah,
This is-
right,
yeah, this is a
definitely.
district account. Our auditors are well aware that we're doing much better and, know that this year that's gonna go down to zero.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to policy committee meeting minutes. I think that's you again, Liz.
Yep, it's me. All right, so the policy, let's see, we started out talking about the use of computers by staff and
Students.
students. And I thought we would have it attached in here, but is it in here?
Yeah.
Should they?
Further on.
The committee reviewed the computer use policy as vetted by our attorney. The single underline is the legal counsel additions, and the double underline is what Steve Jensen additions. All the staff and students will need to sign this updated version at the start of the 2018-2019 school year. We also talked about our social media policy. Again, Steve Jensen has collected information from BOCES and other districts questioning whether it is advisable to have a social media policy or whether the acceptable use policy is sufficient. It is an open question, and the need for a social media policy will be raised with the Communications Committee. We've reviewed policies 6610. Tom Burnett needs to review that in regards to inventory and control of fixed assets. 6620, wire transfers and online banking, were no changes. 6630, disaster recovery plan, no changes. 6635, password protection. Joe will verify with Steve Jensen and double check the 90-day change to your password requirement. Should it be yearly, was the question. 6670, petty cash accounts. Change title of school business official to assistant superintendent for support services. 6700, purchasing, no changes. 6740, purchasing procedures. Change business admin title to assistant superintendent for support services. Joe will check with Tom regarding purchasing regulations. 6800, payroll procedures. Change business administrator title to assistant superintendent for support services. 6830, expense reimbursement, staff. Travel coach or economy, only with the approval, travel first class, business class. Delete number 3, which was in regards to phone calls. 6830.1-R, payroll procedures. Change business official title to assistant superintendent for support services. 6900, disposal of district property. Change school business administrator title to assistant superintendent for support services. 6910, reporting and investigating allegations of fraud, no changes. The action, we're asked Tom about policy, paying taxes not at school but to M&T Bank. Our next meeting is Thursday, May 4th.
Thank you. Any questions for policy? Okay, let's move on to curriculum committee meetings. Those are my minutes. At our last meeting, April 5th, we spent a lot of time talking about the relationship between middle school and high school, particularly since, as we've heard from many who've come to our coffee meetings and other venues about the importance of the middle school approach to teaching. We asked Marvin Krebs to talk to us about sort of the origins of that idea and how schools are experiencing other kinds of relationships, for instance, junior high school models. Is there one model that's somehow more at the forefront of thinking today in education policy circles? Apparently not, according to Marvin. Current thinking is heterodox, according to him, and he pointed out how the education reform movement has actually had a kind of strong impetus over the last maybe 5 to 10 years in terms of pushing student achievement. That's driven certain kinds of changes, even in the middle school grades. We talked about the fact that there doesn't seem to be very clear evidence yet about learning outcomes being significantly better with one model or the other. Then we moved into a more sort of philosophical discussion that built on, I believe, some of the conversation coming out of CDEP about how some of the values that we really prize and value in our middle school, the kind of team approach, care for students, the advisory approach, might actually be really helpful to think about in supporting our high school students as well. How can we draw on the best traditions from both of our buildings and our teachers in both? We talked then about CDEP itself as having a really crucial role to play moving forward in all conversations about long-range planning. As we've already noted, this is the ongoing work of teachers, administrators, parents, and board members. We have a board member who sits with that group. And we would very much like to emphasize that CDEP's work needs to be integrated clearly with budget planning throughout the year and with personnel decisions. There's a way in which it can feel like these things are happening separately and we're not connecting the conversation. Perhaps Tom Burnell could understand more what's happening with CDEP throughout the year in terms of talking with us as we build toward a budget. It is certainly easy to oversimplify the process whereby each of these conversations are taking place, and we would like to have them be integrated. Toward that end, we are asking to form a Citizens Advisory Committee. We will bring a charge to the board tonight for input, and we would like there to be action on that resolution at our next meeting, if at all possible. I shared information about what I'm learning about the budget process going on in other schools in terms of trying to keep curricular values to the fore in all cuts being made, keeping our eye on what it is we want to be accomplishing for our students and with our academic program. Oh, and I will just say that we got into a rather dark final discussion of how many years it will take before the tax cap environment slowly grinds small schools into a very difficult position. What it certainly looks like, if you look at the conversations happening in other small schools all over the state, is they're facing exactly the same pressures we are facing and exactly the same intolerable decisions. Questions? Okay, let's move on to communications. I think that's you, Liz.
Liz, you're on the hot
Liz,
seat
you're on
tonight.
hand.
4.2.5.
4.2.5.
Is it in the? Thank you. All right, communications. Oh, this one, we had a good time. After the dark. We talked about the budget brochure, and the committee discussed the content and timeline for the budget brochure. The petitions for candidates running for Board of Education are due Monday, April 15th at 5 o'clock.
They're all in.
The budget brochure is due at the printers Friday, April 20th, and mailed to every household in our district Monday, May 7th, arriving a week before the vote, Tuesday, May 15th. Steve brought samples from other districts to compare, and upon reviewing our past brochure and others, the committee discussed topics to highlight. Our purpose, how well the kids do, voting, how to register, candidate information, date and location of the budget vote, appreciation of civic participation that we've had during this budget process, acknowledge state aid, that we stayed within the tax cap, mention spreading out the interest payment for the capital project over the 3 years, maintaining our programs, long-range planning, vigorous process of gathering information, safety awards, academic recognition, the Dannon contest, good news achievement blurb from department heads and principals, support from organization, foundations, and community partners. We then went on to talk about Facebook, and Steve gave us access to look at the current Facebook page and let us know that it will be coming live once we are happy with linking our newsfeed and Twitter accounts automatically to populate the Facebook page, thus eliminating having someone manually enter content. There was some discussion as to which Twitter feed should be linked to our Facebook page, such as Joe's and the athletic department. Our next meeting is Thursday, May 10th.
Questions? Yeah.
So does this mean that the Facebook page would only be populated with stuff that's coming from Twitter, or would it also have other?
I think it was an also.
Is it also?
Well,
It was-
Liz mentioned Twitter and the news feed on the website.
Right.
I mean, that will save a lot of time if all
Oh,
of
yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't
of
have to
course.
get entered manually.
Right,
But there will be opportunities for other content.
yes.
Other questions? Comments? Long-range planning committee, part 2, that's me. April 16th. I think that was yesterday. So we went over the slides, some of which we saw tonight, and I think we're going to get a broader array of slides to look at about Rhinebeck's story at our official hearing. Is that correct, Tom? Okay. So we got a little preview of that. I'm not going to go into it since we've already seen the slides. I did share a document with the group which comes out of Blind Brook Rye. It's called Budget 101. It's about a 20-page document, but it's actually incredibly clear, comprehensive introduction to understanding school financing and how taxation works. We've had a lot of questions from people who are really struggling and eager to understand this process, and we talked about whether we could just ask Blind Brook if we could borrow some part of it or adapt it and put it on our website. And actually, in my minutes, which will be posted, there is a link for anyone who just cannot wait for it to get on the website. I read it and found it highly illuminating. We also then worked for the rest of the time pretty much on the draft charge, which you all have before you, and I will read it out loud. Please, can you give us feedback tonight, because we would like to bring it for action at our next meeting. We would like to, well, there have actually been advisory committees in the past. Tom was remembering that there had been one, a budget advisory committee, before the tax cap era. And there is an explicit policy which is printed in these minutes that gives us our guidelines for how they should be formed. So this is the charge. The Board of Education invites members of the community to come forward with expressions of interest in participating in the RCSD Citizen Advisory Committee on Long-Range Planning. Members of the Citizens Advisory Committee will be charged with working alongside members of the Long-Range Planning Committee to advise the Board of Education regarding significant opportunities for innovation in our schools, as well as priority setting for allocation of resources in the coming budget cycle and beyond. These discussions and deliberations will be guided by the mission, vision, and core values of the Rhinebeck Central School District, as well as documents produced by the Comprehensive District Education Plan team, CDEP team. Meetings will be held over the course of at least 3 evenings, although it could expand if people wish, to be scheduled prior to the board's adoption of goals for the 2018-19 academic year. So again, we invite your input on that. Any input? Steve?
So does this mean you want this to be a one-year advisory committee, or would every year would have to be readopted?
I think it would have to be readopted if we choose to reform it. Yeah, it wouldn't be a standing committee.
Right.
My understanding is the Citizens Advisory Committee is a limited kind of ad hoc committee.
And who are the target, who do we envision?
Well, we do have some sort of precedent for this with the task force that was formed prior to bringing the capital project forward for a vote. And we opened it up to participation of all members of the community. We also reached out to people who had expressed interest to us, and I would imagine that would be the case again. So that would include teachers, staff, community members. You wouldn't have to have a child in the school. You have to be a resident of the Rhinebeck Central School District. Any thing you want to say about it? Can we bring it for a vote? We really would like to form this committee.
The charge sounds fine.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. So to conclude my minutes, we talked about many of the challenges of communication. They are formidable, right, with district residents around how public school financing works in New York State. And it's changing all the time. It is difficult to gain access to data. We would really like to get this data to show us here in Rhinebeck exactly how much of our state taxes return to us to fund our local schools. We're investigating how we might find that information and share it with our community. Folks ask us about the lottery. Doesn't the lottery bring us more money for the schools? Well, our understanding is that that is not the case, that the lottery monies simply replace funds that would otherwise be allocated to the schools. So it's no net gain to public schools. So too, people have asked about how local property tax, are they levied exclusively to fund schools? And in fact, that's not the case. And I will quote from the New York State Tax Authority, 62% of the local property tax is levied by schools, but then 17% by counties and 21% divided among towns, special districts, cities, and villages. So property tax, yes, the majority funds our schools, but it does a lot of other things in our communities too. What is our agenda? We're going to ask Blindbrook if we can use their Budget 101 and share it with members of our community through our website. We would like to vote on the resolution at our next meeting to create a Citizens Advisory Committee. We would like to begin meeting this spring and into the summer, since it is our process to formulate goals before the start of the school year, if at all possible, and identify sub-long-range planning groups, as Laura outlined, for budgetary review. Our next meeting is April 30th. Questions? Is that it for all of our minutes?
Yeah.
Need more minutes?
Yeah, well, that's it.
Okay. Duchess Bosse's administrative budget vote and board member election.
Okay, so you have in your packets a form that we will have to fill out after next week's special meeting, the primary purpose of which is to vote on the annual BOCES administrative budget and for BOCES board members. Every school district in the county is required to vote on the same day, evening, and that evening is a week from tonight, so it should be a relatively short meeting, although I anticipate there will be a few other action items on that agenda, but it'll primarily be taken up with these two. There are four individuals running for 3 BOCES board seats. Dale Culver and Rick Keller-Coffey. They're both from Weebatuck. My understanding is that we could only choose one of them. You can't have 2 from any single district on the BOCES board. So we'd have to make a choice between those 2 individuals, and then Ed McCormick from the Arlington district and Rob Rubin from the Wappingers district are also running 4 people for 3 seats. So I will not predetermine who you may decide to nominate and vote for. We can do that next week, but you'll get your, when you get your board agenda for next Tuesday, the names of the people in each of those slots will be blank. You decide who you want to nominate and vote for, okay? I have not been contacted by any of these individuals. They may have reached out to some of you. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, which makes it a little difficult to make a decision as to who to vote for. But Mark, who also is the vice president of the Dutchess County School Boards Association, may be able to shed some light or offer his opinion on that topic. So if there hasn't been any outreach, we're pretty much going to have to rely on Mark's insight as to who we might want to vote for. The second part is on the back page of the item in your board packet, and that is to either approve or disapprove of the BOCES administrative budget, which is in the amount of $4,565,785. Each school district in the county, or in the BOCES in our case, gets to either vote it up or vote it down. I'm not sure if you have any other insight into that, perhaps before next meeting. I recall hearing earlier in the year that their increase was pretty modest. I mean, it was around 2%. So they're mindful of the fact that school districts are under a tax levy cap, and they've done a pretty good job over the last number of years keeping their administrative budget very close to that tax cap, even though it varies from school district to school district in the ballpark. Was another point I was going to make, but it's out of my mind, but it'll come back at some point. So, we're only voting on the administrative budget. We're not voting on, for example, the program budget, because the program budget is supported by what they bill us for sending X number of kids to CTI, sending X number of kids to special ed programs there, whatever. That's what funds those. It's essentially a subscription-based part of the budget, but the administrative budget is their fixed costs to run the operation. That's really what we're voting on. So that'll be happening next Tuesday.
Okay.
So, do you want me to give some insight on the candidates tonight, or would you prefer to do it next week?
I'm fine with that, if
That'd be great.
you'd like to.
All right, so I'll just mention that 3 out of the 4 candidates are already on the BOCES board. That'd be Dale Culver, Ed McCormick, and Rob Rubin. I don't know all 4 of them. I do know Rick Keller Coffey and Rob Rubin through my association with the Dutchess County School Board Association. Both of them also serve on that. They're both, I believe, good candidates for the BOCES board. I just had a thought that I should look into a little further why we have 2 candidates running from the Weebatuck board. I'll try to find out some more information and pass that along to you
That'd be good.
before we vote on the candidates.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So we have a week to
Okay.
figure that out.
All right. Yes, Jackie.
Do we get any additional supporting information to have some context, other than knowing that BOCES administrative budget keeps to around 2%? I mean, I feel like, don't really know what to make of that.
We have
Is
in
there
the
more?
past.
What's that?
We have in the past.
They've given us
gotten
more information.
When they decide they want to send something out, they being the individual candidates.
No.
Are you talking about
No,
BOCES
no,
in
we're talking about
terms of the
the
thing?
budget,
Yeah, we'll check and see what's available there, and
That'd be good to have.
Frequently they
we'll get that to you in
Yeah,
advance.
last year they came.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the,
So we can
The
get it with
BOCES board
our
members.
board packet for next
if
week.
not sooner, if we have
Okay.
it sooner, yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jacqueline. That's
Yep.
good. Okay. So let's move on to good news. Good news.
The play was fantastic. It was
Yeah, there you
really,
go.
if the sets were amazing, the kids were incredible, the music was fantastic. I love that play. One of my
And
favorites.
I would have to give a shout out to Sandy Kane, for those of you who saw the show on Friday night. It was quite extraordinary, actually. She was pinch hitting for a student who was ill, and stepped in, and it's very impressive.
What role did she step into?
If you know the play,
I do.
she played the role of, I can't remember the name, but the kind of the father's former nanny, who was a less than warm and fuzzy individual. Yeah. She was great, playing totally against type, but she was fantastic.
Yeah, it's wonderful how many students take part in the theater program, and it's such a fantastic.
I would also
Aspect of our
mention,
school.
kind of as an adjunct to that, for the first time, I'm sure, Cynthia Baer, who is the drama club director, worked with Ed to use an online ticket purchasing. And I'm not sure how many of you used it, but worked, from my perspective, very well. I think it took a lot of load off the ladies in the main office, who normally have to be spending a lot of their time in the couple of weeks running up to the show to be selling tickets. Not that they don't do it gladly, but I think it took a lot of burden off them, and hopefully there were other ancillary benefits to doing that, but I thought it was great, so. Okay, that's all I have.
Old business.
Don't have a lot of business.
Okay. Public comment. We have another opportunity for public comment. We invite anyone in our audience to come forward and speak. Okay. Any other?
Yeah, before we all adjourn for this evening, the members of the Facilities Committee need to make a decision as to whether we're meeting this Thursday. So I just throw that out there. We don't have to do that now, but we have to decide what we're doing with Thursday's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have under other.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our action items.
Okay.
If any member has any concerns with items on the consent agenda, please let us know. Anyone like to remove anything from the consent agenda? May I have a motion to approve, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, conversation. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the following resolution? Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education hereby adopts the proposed budget for the 2018-19 school year in the amount of $33,920,159 and authorizes the following proposition to be placed on the ballot at the annual meeting on May 15th, 2018. Shall the Board of Education of the Rhinebeck Central School District be authorized to expend the sums of money which will be required for school district purposes for the 2018-19 school year in the amount of $33,920,159 and to levy the necessary tax therefore.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation in support of funding for the BMS Week of Discovery program as submitted by Mr. Henry Frischknecht in the amount of $2,880 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Again, this is an amazing program. It's so wonderful to see it come back again, the Week of Discovery. Everyone loves it, and thank you very much to the Rhinebeck Science Foundation for its support. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of additional emergency conditional substitute teachers and substitute non-instructional staff for the 2017-18 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in
Hold
favor?
on,
Nope.
Just a comment, the original item in your board packets had 2 names on that list, and what's at your place tonight has only one of those 2 names. I can explain that to you later, but trust me on this one.
Well, as amended. As amended.
As amended.
All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. That motion passes as amended. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a first reading the consideration of modifications to the following board policies. Number 4526, use of computers by staff and students. Number 6670, petty cash accounts. Number 6740, purchasing procedures. Number 6800, payroll procedures. Number 6830, expense reimbursement staff. And number 6900, disposal of district property.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I apologize for not bringing this up when we were discussing these earlier. There are one typo, and I just had a question about
Okay.
another.
Give me the number.
Yeah, 4526,
Okay?
and this is the
policy.
multi-page one. Yeah. Use of computers by staff and students,
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4th page.
Hang on. 2, 3, okay.
The second sentence in the last paragraph, however, the RCSD and BOCES, through their staff members, technology and systems reviews, shall monitor online. I think it's
right.
online.
Yes, okay, good, thank you.
Good catch.
Yeah.
And then on the next page at the very top, you've got, or unwelcome communications should.
Yeah.
Which would you like?
Which is stronger.
I'll flip a coin.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then on policy 6830, expense reimbursement staff. It's about the travel arrangements for the potential for flying business or first class. Has this ever happened, and why would we ever approve a first class ticket?
It has not happened in my in my recollection, but the way the policy was written before certainly left it open without any kind of oversight like prior approval. So we thought at the very least that should be changed. You know, I could give you not a typical scenario, but something not I will, without using names, I'll recall that a number of years ago, we kind of in a very quick turnaround because of the hiring process, we need to send somebody to be trained for Project Lead the Way, and it was down south, so that was the closest training we could get that person into. We needed to get him trained before the start of the school year, so that potentially he might not have been able to get an economy class flight down there on short notice, and that didn't happen, but we may have been in a position where he's telling us, I can't get there, now I can't get trained before school starts, in which case we may have worked with him to either find another economy class flight, or if there was no way to get him there, and we had to get him there, we'd have to get him there. But the way the policy was written, it was just if available, and it was pretty loosey-goosey, so we thought we should tighten that up some. I've never seen it happen in my 20 years here,
good.
but anyway.
Are there any other?
Nope, that's
Okay.
it, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve Mary Lehan and Terry Sekula to provide additional one-to-one aid support after school is required at Rhinebeck High School and Chancellor Livingston Elementary School respectively. See attached.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution? Be it resolved, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, that the Board of Education hereby approves the contract with Dutchess County BOCES for the acquisition of computer, technology hardware, software, and related equipment through a 3-year installment purchase agreement, IPA, commencing in the 2017-18 school year with a total principal cost of $144,356.09, and be it further resolved that the Rhinebeck Central School District will pay Dutchess County BOCES through its regular monthly billing cycle over the 3-year period to commence during the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Shiloh Martinez, substitute food service worker, to the position of 5.00 hour, 8:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., food service helper.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiation with our collective bargaining units?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. We are moving into executive session. Thank you. Thank you for being here.